Hello? Hi. So, hi again. My name is Giulia Pizzini. I work in IECP, which is the Institute for European Energy and Climate Policy. And I will be hosting the second part of this event for the afternoon. So thanks to those who are still with us from the morning, and welcome to the ones who are just now joining for the policy part of the event. Before we start, I would just like to go through the agenda for this afternoon. So this afternoon we will look at the policy implication and think about what future energy policies should take into account, and all the policy implications that are coming from our projects but also beyond. We will start with a keynote speech from Margot from DG Energy, who will give us an overview on the current status of European energy efficiency policy. We will then move on to the policy learnings from the project. So this morning, for those of you who were here, we heard about the methodology and how the more modeling or techie part of the projects was articulated. Now we will hear more about the policy learnings. And then we will move on to a second keynote speech from Emma Mooney from the IEA we will introduce that later. And finally, we'll have a panel with 5 guests. Unfortunately, one had to drop out because, October is not the best month of the year. People are starting to get sick. So, unfortunately, Roland will not be here with us. Mike here. So as I said, we start now with an introduction from Margot Pinot. Margot is the team leader of policy development and strategy in the energy efficiency unit in the European Commission in DG Ener. Prior to that, she had a 7-year experience in the EU funding program, so she was responsible for planning, coordinating, and developing the funding schemes for energy efficiency under Horizon Europe and LiveSet. Before joining the Commission, Margot worked in the private sector in France in the field of smart homes, home automation, and buildings, energy management system. So she will introduce, as I said, the policy session, with an overview of the current state of play, and specifically on the Fit for 55 package, with an overview of the main new elements of the Energy Efficiency Directive and recast, and the rest of the policy framework. Please, Margot, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Giulia, and good afternoon to everyone. So, as Giulia said, my name is Margot Pinot. I work for 10 years already on energy efficiency in DG Ener, Energy Efficiency Unit. Before, actually, I was in charge of the programs Horizon 2020, so maybe some of you can remember me from there. And then now I moved since 2021 to legislation, Energy Efficiency Directive. So I was indeed the team leader in charge of the negotiations of the EED recast, which we successfully finished this year. And the directive is now adopted and entered and in force as the EU law. So I will present to you the directive. Because for the future policy developments, I'm here to listen to your advice and to discuss with you where do you see how we can make energy efficiency happen, truly being considered in all the levels and making it ensure the most cost-efficient pathway for our decarbonization objectives. So. The context, the policy context of the revision of the directive, the last revision, is of course the overarching Fit for 55 package, of which the objective is of course to accelerate climate-related efforts and increase of the targets for 2030 for greenhouse gas emissions reduction to 55%. That's why the name, and then underlying policies and legislation in energy and other fields should contribute to this target, and that's why energy efficiency, as you know, have been modeled in the overall climate modeling, and the level of ambition was modeled to reaching this target, and that's why the revision of EED. But it's not isolated revision. We have also the revision of other pieces of legislation: Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, Renewables Directive. Renewables is successfully closed as well, and the EPBD is still ongoing. And we had another very important element of the policy context that added a new perspective, very important one. REPowerEU and current still ongoing energy crisis, I would say, added a very important element of energy security and security of energy supply. And from this perspective, energy efficiency should also be looked at, because it is contributing substantially to reduce the tensions and the needs of imports of fuels, and help to reach the objectives of REPowerEU. That, as you know, the communication set the objective of getting independence from imports from Russia of fossil fuels by 2027. So for the energy efficiency recast, the key dates, you see them here. So the directive was adopted by the co-legislators in Strasbourg on the 13th of September this year. And it was published in the Official Journal of the European Union on the 20th of September, and therefore it entered into force 10 days after, on the 10th of October. So very recently. And now for most of the provisions, member states have time for the transposition of 2 years period, but some actually are already required to be considered earlier. Very shortly about the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, because here I cannot really go into the content unless we are discussing the Commission proposal, since the negotiations are still ongoing. The proposal was a little bit later adopted than the EED. It was in December 2021. We reached the stage of general approach of, the positions of both co-legislators, so general approach in October 2022 by the Council, and then the Parliament vote on their position in March 2023, and since then we entered into the trilogues. And we are in the ultimate stage of the trilogue. The last one is expected very soon from now, but I don't have the exact date. It's expected to be the last one, but of course we cannot prejudge. The overall objectives, of course, is to contribute to the climate target with reducing the buildings' greenhouse gas emissions, and in the long-term vision to decarbonize our building stock and have climate neutrality in the building sector by 2050, as all the other sectors do. Coming back to Energy Efficiency Directive revision, then the EED recast, what happened? The main elements of the revision are the increased target. As said, it was modeled within the climate modeling, and then it was further increased by REPowerEU, because this additional policy element added to the ambition and made our efforts accelerated for 2030. Energy efficiency first principle is really the article and the provisions I would like to very much highlight and discuss today with you, because it's a very powerful tool, and it's the only tool I think that can ensure that our energy transition will happen in most cost-effective, most sustainable manner that we can imagine. So this is really a tool to make it happen, because there are many possible decarbonization pathways, but we should really select the one that will be less resource intensive, less energy intensive, of course, and therefore less costly for the society, because for inefficiencies, in any case, the society will pay in the last in the last outcome. So that's why it is so important to put it into practice. And now Article 3 of the EED put a legal frame around it. We already had it in the governance regulation, but here it is more concretely spelled out, having application to policy making, for planning, strategies, but also for the investment decisions. The third element I would like to highlight is the strengthened end-use energy savings obligations. So current Article 7, and in future it will be 8, 9, 10. Energy savings obligation in many member states is implemented as energy efficiency obligation schemes, obliging energy providers, energy sellers, distributors to realize energy savings in the end-use sector. So we are talking about final energy consumption reduction through energy efficiency measures in the end-use sectors, which are buildings, transport, all the end users. It's a very important provision that help member states to achieve the overall target and make, target achievement less hazardous and more, policy driven, because here the concrete measures must be developed, designed to deliver final energy savings. Then next element is a stronger exemplary role of public sector. Here we have a full chapter in the EED recast dedicated to public sector, with the overarching target on the public sector of final energy consumption in terms of 1.9% per year, with public buildings renovation obligation, which continues but is extended, and then with public procurement obligation to consider energy efficiency. And finally, increased focus on alleviating energy poverty, consumer empowerment, because this energy transition puts an energy consumer in the center, but not in the center of paying for energy transition, but benefiting from it. That's how it should be seen, and that's why we need to make sure that all classes of society and type of consumers can truly benefit from it, and not pay the costs of it. So energy efficiency first principle is in Article 3. And here we have a clear obligation on member states that they make sure that this principle is applied in all planning, policy and major investment decisions. So it's a very large application field, very large scope of application. Though for the investments, it has been precise that it covers the major investments. So there are thresholds that were introduced in the directive for the investments where this principle has to be assessed. It's over 100 million for overall, and specifically for the transport infrastructure, which is more costly, it's 175 million. But these thresholds will be reassessed in the future, because that's what the co-legislators provided as a possibility to the Commission to evaluate if the level of the thresholds is effective, allowing the effectiveness of the principle. Then it also obliges member states to put in place monitoring of application with a monitoring entities, processes. So all this will need to be put into practice by member states, and we need to help them with issuing guidance. Already the Commission is working currently on the guidance for the interpretation of the legal provisions to help understand what is in the legal text, and that will help in the transposition process. But specifically on this article, which is new and which is very broad and large in the application, we must precise much more in practice how member states should apply, monitor, and supervise the application of this principle. And then costs, and for that reason, they will need to develop cost-benefit methodologies, and also for these methodologies, the Commission should issue guidance how these methodologies should be designed in the future, so that we properly are able, that the member states properly implement the principle. As regards the targets, So for 2030, we have the overall EU level target of reducing primary and final energy consumption by 11.7%, comparing to the 2020 reference scenario. And at national level, member states will need to define, and they are doing this already, national contributions, which are non-binding, but which need to be included in the national energy and climate plans, and they need to add up to the level of ambition that it is EU level. And if they don't, the Commission has the possibility to come back to member states, because there is an ambition gap mechanism where the Commission will be assessing whether these contributions are really adding up to the level of EU target. If not, some member states will need to basically reassess and put the higher level of their national contributions. And in terms of absolute figures, you see for primary energy consumption, this corresponds in 2030 for not more than 992 MTOEs of primary energy consumption, and final energy consumption is 763. With one more thing, that final energy consumption at EU level, this target is binding, and it is indicative for primary energy consumption. And the rationale for this was uncertainty, which we are living in during the crisis when this directive was negotiated, and especially uncertainty in terms of primary energy consumption, what kind of fuels we'll be using, where they will be coming from, because we were facing major disruptions, and that was one of the arguments of making this target indicative. As regards exemplary role, as said, we have 3 articles. The overall new target on final energy consumption reduction, that is 1.9 per annum for all public bodies. Public bodies are defined in a very large manner in the directive as national, regional and local authorities and entities directly financed and administered by those authorities, but not having industrial and commercial character. So all the administration level and all type of public service is covered by this, and then member states will need to really define, identify their public sector bodies, define the energy, estimate and then calculate the final energy consumption and ensure that there is the consumption reduction of 1.9 per year. Article 6 is about buildings renovation, public buildings renovation. This is not a new obligation, it already exists. And the level of the obligation is also the same, so it's 3% per year, but the scope of the obligation is larger because before, in the currently transposed directive, it covers national governments buildings, central administration buildings, and in the future it will cover this enlarged scope of public bodies owning buildings, so national, regional, local levels. And the level of ambition is also higher because they need to be renovated to the NZEP level for the moment, and in the future when we will have the zero emission definition, the zero emission buildings definition in the PBD, that would be the level in the future. So it's a very ambitious and also costly measure, but we need, of course, to plan decarbonization of building stock, and this measure calculated, the step change to achieve this objective in 2050 for public buildings. And finally, Article 7 is about public procurement and public procurers that need to take into account high efficiency performance of products, services, works, wherever they are regulated by some specific regulations like eco-design or specific other regulations of buildings, etc. They need to consider those, but if not, they need to consider energy efficiency first principle. So I'm speeding up because I see that I'm a little bit too slow. I mentioned already energy savings obligation, which is a very strong measure to deliver final energy savings, and we have a stepwise approach to get to the final level of annual energy savings of 1.9 in 2028. And here, part of this savings has to be achieved among energy poor households, and member states should define this share based on what they reported in terms of energy poverty under the NECPs. Article 11 is also changing the approach to energy audits and also introducing a new obligation for energy management systems. So the approach is changed because now we are not looking at the size of the company, but at the annual energy consumption of the company, defining two thresholds, 10 terajoules threshold for energy audit, that it will be mandatory like it is now, and will have to be done every 3 years. In addition, recommendations of energy audits will need to be included in an action plan, so that to make sure that the company is taking really into consideration these recommendations and have a plan to implement them. Energy management system is for really big energy users with annual energy consumption above 85 terajoules. Finally, Article 22 on information awareness raising, which is strengthening these provisions which were already in the directive, looking at consumers' empowerment, information, creating incentives, financial, legal frameworks, promote and facilitate efficient use of energy for final consumers, promote behavioral change, so many things that your projects were investigating on. Finally, a large part of this article is dedicated to one-stop shops, which should be contact point for a consumer to accompany them in the whole journey towards energy transition, towards energy efficiency, across different steps, administrative, financing, and be able to really advise the consumer in all the steps they are taking towards decarbonization of buildings and their, let's say, life habits. So one-stop shops, we will have more specific guidance that the Commission will need to develop for this specific part. But it's really important because we are entering a very new domain area where consumers might be lost and they need advice on technologies, on contractual arrangements. They need to be defended if there are abusive clauses. So I think that, there is a big scope for developing consumer rights and building basically the market trust, connecting the demand and the supply side, so that we really scale up the investments in energy transition, energy efficiency. Empowerment of vulnerable consumers, vulnerable groups, so it's Article 24. That is aiming to protect people affected by energy poverty, vulnerable customers, low-income households. The definition is quite broad, and we go beyond the definition that is currently in use in the Electricity Directive, which is defining vulnerable customers by adding the low-income households, people living in social housing, but also very much focusing on final users, because in some cases they are not in direct contractual relation with energy provider, still they are concerned by energy costs. And these cases will also be defended from energy poverty. Energy poverty should be addressed. So final users is very applicable for collective heating and cooling provision, whether it's a district or other type of collective heating. I think that I will not go into the technical details of heating and cooling and district heating and cooling, but just flag that two elements. At local level, there will be more planning, comprehensive planning of heating and cooling. This is very much linked for system integration and decarbonization overall. So for municipalities that are over 45,000, those municipalities, those communes will need to develop local heating and cooling plans and really use the best available options for renewable or waste heat provision to decarbonize heating. And heating is, of course, very local. That's why it makes sense to plan it at the local level. And Article 26 is on district heating, where the aim is to decarbonize also this sector. It's hard to decarbonize, it's very challenging, but you see the steps in which progressively the share of renewables is being increased in the supply of district heating until getting 100% renewables and or waste heat in 2050 in the supply of district heating. Financing, so here the Article 30 is about facilitation, promotion of specific financing products for energy efficiency. Better linking the financial offer to what is needed, to build a business case, to help actors, market actors that are trying to, do a business from energy efficiency, because this is also what we believe, that the market can deliver on energy efficiency. We have ESCOs, energy service companies, but they struggle to find dedicated and appropriate financing for scale up their business. So that's what this article is about, among others. But also there is new reporting obligation on member states to see what happens actually at national level, how dedicated financing for energy efficiency is promoted. So that's everything from my side, and very happy to be here and hear further discussions in this event. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Margot. Thank you for setting the baseline for our discussion this afternoon on the future of energy policies. We are running a tiny bit behind schedule, but I think it would be nice if there are some questions for Margot. Maybe we could take one or two. It was a bit. Wolfgang.
I should come back. Okay.
Thanks for this nice overview. You were arguing at a point in time about the indicative nature of the primary energy target, while the final energy target is mandatory. And your argument was, if I understood properly, it has to do with supply security, more or less. There could be more gas, maybe in the system as compared to renewables that tend to reduce the primary energy consumption. That was a little bit how I understood it, but for me the argument is a bit weak, because 2030 is still a few years ahead, and most likely, I mean, our answer to this supply security threat was also to enhance the installation of renewables. I mean, yesterday I had the chance from German Secretary of State to see how the renewables are accelerating in Germany now, considering last year and this year and so on. So there should, on the contrary, be a push for the primary energy target. Maybe you can still show a bit the arguments. I can understand there was a lot of discussion behind, but...
Yes, thank you for the question. It's really a tricky question, because the arguments are mainly political, and many factors interplayed in making and weakening the Commission proposal, because basically the Commission proposal was to have a primary energy consumption target binding. We are trying to decarbonize, and there is a big push for hydrogen, green hydrogen production. Many member states are very ambitious about setting targets in green hydrogen. Green hydrogen production is energy intensive. This might be one of the avenues that is somehow justifying making this target indicative. But I would be on your side that we will not see this realized in the real world. I would see rather renewables contributing to great decrease of primary energy consumption. Another argument was that we need to do the electrification, and that would also provide some unknowns for primary energy consumption, because we'll maybe electrify the end users much more fast than we will integrate the share of renewables. And you know, this direct electrification might be coming from you know, still burning gases, fossil fuels, whatever, and that's why to some inefficiencies that will be temporary, and that in the final outcome will be solved by increasing the share of renewables, right? Mm-hmm. Sure.
In 2030, certainly,
Yeah.
quantité négligeable,
That's what we think
I would
as
say,
well.
and at the level of the energy balance, not sure we would see anything. And the direct electrification would, for me, rather enhance the energy efficiency. But,
Yeah.
but I see
Yeah,
the kind of argument.
in the final outcome, of course, direct electrification, if we are electrifying through efficient technologies like heat pumps, switching to EV, the final energy consumption will be more efficient. But it depends how electricity is produced, and maybe in 2030 we will not be yet at this stage to have it much more efficiently produced. So maybe that was the unknown. But I think, you know, it was rather not really argument-based discussion. It was in the crisis context where emotions are taking over, and see, we have many unknowns. You see what happens. We don't know what is on the supply side, so we cannot bind our hands at this stage for a binding target. Yeah.
Just one short question. Thanks a lot for the race through the ED, which we really appreciate. I think as a Commission on this point you delivered really, because the ED is, in my eyes, quite worthy. But now we notice in many member states a situation that despite the war against the Ukraine, energy efficiency is not that sexy anymore, I say. Which for me is not understandable. And therefore my question would be, could you, I mean, first step is now to transpose the directive in the member states, which takes a certain time, but could you also maybe for the next working program, but could you consider or think of any political strategies or actions from the side of the Commission to boost, like the renovation wave was for buildings, but also for energy efficiency as a whole, really to boost the topic, or to specify the efficiency first approach? I don't know, just really in order to not to neglect the potential which really lies in energy efficiency, because the member states, in my eyes, need to be really forced to think about the strategy much more than they do these days. Thanks.
Yes, and we clearly see the potential of energy efficiency first principle to enhance the discussion on energy efficiency, because it's potentially a very powerful tool if implemented practically on the ground. And I think that member states will be asking for guidance, so that's also an opportunity for us to show them how to apply it practically. And to make this principle really work for our future system integration, for our future system design, to make sure that we really select the most efficient options for energy end use and supply, both, among various options of decarbonization of energy system, right? So really, if applying this principle, we should make it should ensure that the cost for society will be the lowest, because we will avoid wastage and inefficiencies that are embodied in the system. And now, how to make it practical? Yeah, this is something that we count very much on you, the projects, the research, and then we need to put it on the paper and provide to the right process and right methods to member states, and right surveillance as well.
I think we can continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions.
should I? Okay, now it works. So thanks, Margot, once again. And I was just saying that your last statement gave me a perfect bridge to the next speaker. So for the policy recommendation and implications that can be derived from the MICAT project. So I would invite Barbara Schlumann on stage. Barbara, she's the coordinator of MICAT. She's working at Fraunhofer ISI, holds a PhD in energy economics. Her current research focus is in the design and evaluation of energy and climate policies and the monitoring of energy and climate targets, specifically for Germany. Since 2011, she's member of the board of ECEEE, and since 2020, she is a member of the German Council of Experts on Climate Change. And she will now present to us some policy learnings from the MICAT project. Thank you, Barbara. The floor is yours.
Yes, thanks a lot for this kind introduction, and really Margot's presentation, especially what she said on Article 3 EED on the energy efficiency first principle, which is a new article in the EED. We really see a very important application of MICAT for this article, and we really hope that MICAT and MICAT tool will be used for that. In general, we think that, and that's not only a result from MICAT, but that's true for all project and activities on multiple benefits, starting from IEA and other ongoing projects as referee and past project as COMBI or Odyssey Mur, which were already mentioned, that these multiple benefits are yes, widely discussed during the last decade, especially since IEA started to report on that, and both on the policy level and also at the level of companies. I added the level of companies. It was mentioned, the M-Benefits project was mentioned in the discussion this morning, and this is really, I fully agree, it's very important, but MICAT tool is more dedicated to the policy level, to policy makers, other stakeholders, and not so much on companies, but nevertheless it's quite important, and other tools as benefits are already used for that. The problem is that these multiple benefits are more and more mentioned, both to justify energy policies and also energy efficiency and also climate targets, but that they are rarely reported at a quantitative or even monetized level. And coming to the long-term target of climate neutrality pathways, that's also what Margot just mentioned. We also have to look at this target, and therefore we need a fair comparison of all options to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, including demand-side options, supply-side options, and others, but especially here for this fair comparison, we really think that also a quantitative inclusion of multiple benefits is extremely important. I already mentioned the IEA work, starting with this famous flower on the multiple benefits of energy efficiency, which is shown in almost all presentations on that, but it's really a great picture to show how wide these benefits are. And these benefits are also used to justify more ambitious energy efficiency targets. And we just talked about that energy efficiency may not play such an important role in many member states, but at the IEA conference in June this year, there were at least 45 governments, most governments also from the EU member states, states, and there they made a statement to almost double global energy efficiency progress by 2030. And as you can see here, it was only justified by these multiple benefits for all the states. Therefore, I think that's a very important activity. And the energy efficiency first principle, there's no need to talk about because Margot already said that. And here really for the implementation, we need to take into account these wider benefits of energy efficiency solutions beyond pure coverage of energy and energy cost savings. And here we really think that tools as we developed in MICAT can really help. And this graph, I think, makes it very explicit why an inclusion of multiple benefits is so important. It's a graph from the NFirst project, another Horizon project, and it compares two scenarios, a low efficiency scenario and a high efficiency scenario, and it also takes into account options on the supply side. And as you can see here, the high energy efficiency scenario is slightly more expensive when only looking at energy system costs in a period of 30 years. These are cumulated values for a period of 30 years. It's slightly, the costs are slightly higher, not much, but they are. Therefore, and the main reason for that is the relatively high costs of energy efficiency options in the building sector for building retrofitting. That's really, I think, a problem, and we also see it in actual policy in the discussion on the EPPD, these high costs, but here we really think that including the benefits, the further benefits of energy efficiency can really show a different picture and make clear that for fair comparison, it's not enough only to look at these energy system costs, but to have a broader view and to include the benefits, external benefits, but also negative externalities which you have for a lot of supply options. Well, that's only a quick view on MICAT tool, which was already presented, and also at the lunch break. I hope some of you could make use of that and have a look, a deeper look at this tool. Here's only one example what you can do with MICAT. We are comparing here the EU reference scenario 2020 with the energy efficiency scenario, including estimated savings from the Fit for 55 package. And these savings, the difference between these scenarios is then used to calculate in a quantitative way and partly also in a monetized way to calculate effects. Here is one example, import dependency, but you can also use, starting with these savings, use it to calculate, for example, indicators for energy poverty, other economic indicators, and so on. I will also mention, I just mentioned that energy efficiency alone is not the only focus, but that we have to look at the climate neutrality target planned for 2050 or even earlier in some member states, and for that you have to include not only energy efficiency but also other reduction options to reach these targets, especially renewable energies and their benefits and costs. And that's the main issue of Seed MICAD, which is the follow-up project of MICAD starting on 1st December, that is in 1 month. And this also means that MICAD, what is done in MICAD and the website and also the tool will be available for several years now and can be used, and it will be further developed, taking into account also other options to reach climate neutrality, especially in that project, renewable energy sources. Well, what are the contributions of MICAD and Seed MICAD and also other projects on multiple benefits? Referee to mention, because referee will also be included in the Seed MICAD project. That is, we will even get a much broader view on that. We hope to contribute to a more fair comparison of the different options to reach future climate neutrality targets. We really hope that a tool like MICAD can strongly support the implementation of the energy efficiency first principle in the member states, which they have to do. We hope that it's a simple approach, because we are not using more abstract scenarios, modeling, but we are based on indicators which are directly linked to energy savings, and also to, and the data are taken from scenarios, but also from ex post and ex ante evaluations. Therefore, we hope that these data can be taken relatively easily, at least at the European and national level. At the local level, it's another story. It's much more difficult here. Well, we hope that this tool will be used broadly and is hopefully very easy to understand, to make own calculations. And well, our final aim of this and other project is that we hope to more broadly to consider multiple benefits in policy making at all different levels. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Now it works, yes. Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions for Barbara on the MICAD project? If not, you were super clear. Thank you.
I hope it was all clear, and I really hope for broad application of this concept. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara, once again. I will then invite Heike to the podium. So you've seen her before. She is the coordinator of the Nutrients project, but she's also actually the research lead in Nudge, and she will speak about the Nudge project. Heike is the coordinator of the business unit energy policy in the Competence Center of Energy Policy and Energy Markets at Fraunhofer. Her research interests include the design and evaluation of energy and climate change policies, particularly in the field of energy efficiency, digitalization, and energy justice. She holds a PhD in public administration studies from the University of Constance, and she will now present to us the policy recommendations from the Nudge project.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Julia, for the kind introduction. Yeah. It's a bit hard to follow Barbara with the MICAD project, which was so strongly dedicated to policy and policy implications and targeting policymakers, in a policy session with a project that is not so clearly targeted on the policymakers as the primary stakeholders, but of course also policy learnings recommendations play an important role in our work as well. but you will see. But a different focus, and you have already seen this morning when the colleagues Anne and Peter spoke about the project, that we have really refined results since we were working so much directly in the field. Unfortunately, or the world is complex, people are complex, so that's not really a clear, okay, this is a one-size-fits-all solution. So also the policy recommendations we can draw, or let's say also the policy learnings we have, are very refined and have to also be handled with care, let's say, at this stage. So we have the 5 pilots that were introduced early in the project, and all these pilots where we were working directly in the field, measuring the energy consumption of people, measuring their behavior on the app and so on. Of course, it's very context specific. So the results also that we receive from this, we have to be very careful. We cannot just generalize it, but nevertheless have some overarching implications or policy learnings we can draw from that. The benefit from being so much into detail is that it really helped us also understanding behavioral mechanisms, like mechanisms underlying decision making or behavior, which we would not have been able to draw from an approach that is maybe more generalizable than the one we took. So this morning we looked a lot also on the pilots in specific, but we have done quite some other work in this project before, and among others there was a very extensive survey going far beyond the participants of the pilots, and where we looked, okay, what happens, like what intent do people have to change their behavior, and also where do we see actual behavior change, particularly here in the case of reducing heating. And we can see some, like, tested some hypotheses, and what we can really see is that that I want to draw from here is that perceived behavioral control had like a major impact on the intent, mediating the actual behavior then. And perceived behavior control, it comes back to also one thing that Margot said then when we talk about Article 22 in the EAD now, really information, like awareness raising, that people understand on one hand what they're doing, on the other hand that they have the proper information to draw conclusions that they actually enables them, and they have the feeling, okay, they can control what is happening. They have an understanding of the energy bill, but they also have the data to control and know what happens if they decide for this or that. What I want to emphasize here is the Nudge project was very much on an individual level. That shouldn't mean that the policy conclusions we draw from here are necessarily on an individual level and means putting the pressure back to like each individual. But even so, that's very individual approach. From policy making perspective, we have to see what can we do to reduce the barriers that the consumers are facing, like in a systemic way. We see, like, for example, access to data is crucial, and that is something that can be changed on a systemic level, on a policy level, and not necessarily per person, one person at a time, and putting the pressure there. So we see perceived behavior control playing an important role. We see also subjective norm playing an important role. So the question of what do people think is expected from them, and also that is of course something where we can build on nudges. Earlier the question was on like comparison nudges. Does it make sense to have these comparisons included or not? Of course, also it brings some other difficulties. If I say your neighbor uses twice as much energy or half as much energy, I mean, we can assume the problems that would come with that if we do that outside of a pilot setting. But it's subjective norm and what people think is expected from them plays a role in the intent for them to reduce their energy. So what can we draw from that? We have the question of how can policies actually impact actual behavior change. And the one I mentioned is already improving perceived behavioral control is crucial here from our perspective. That could be one thing following particular from the survey, that we have not only, like on one hand, of course, design and information campaigns, things that are now also under Article 22, raising the awareness, but also then targeting intermediate actors. Yeah, it doesn't only have to be the consumers that are targeted directly, but what do we also ask from energy service companies? How do we ask them to provide better information? For example, when the smart meter rollout is coming, and people people should have access to the data that they produce themselves by their energy consumption. It cannot end at the point that people have a right to access the data. The question is, how accessible is it? How fast can people access the data? How understandable it is? And here also, like the intermediary actors could play an important role, and also should take some of the responsibility to make this really accessible for the people. Improving attitudes is very placative, but the question is really, okay, what do we understand in terms of comfort, in terms of less comfort? We see it's very different between different type of people, but here this goes back to how are social norms, what social norms do we have, and to which extent can they also be shaped over time, which has a very close link then to the energy saving behavior of the individuals and how they contribute to a major goal. So we saw very clearly, for example, in the last year with the energy crisis, that behavioral change had a huge impact on reduction of energy demand. So for example, in Germany with heating, we had a reduction of about 15%, about which around 8% were attributed to the warmer winter, but 7 to 8% were really attributed to people turning down the heat and changing their behavior. So here the impact was very clear, like very straightforward to which goal are we supporting, which was quite directly the fear of too less energy during the winter, which obviously seems to be more tangible for people than climate change as a goal to contribute to. Okay, then the question earlier we already had, so how do we nudge effectively? And we already saw that this is a super difficult question, but one thing I wanted to show you here is that we had done in the beginning of the project this survey, and we were looking at different kind of consumers and identified different clusters of consumers that also in turn reacted differently to the nudges given, or that where we assumed we would have to give different nudges, or different nudges would be most effectively depending on what kind of consumer we have in front of us. Unfortunately, like the design, as pointed out earlier, didn't really allow to test for each individual nudge on different types of consumers, just because we were really in the field. We really had implemented the smart meters in the household, and to split up the groups to that extent to really see which nudge is most effective in which group was not feasible here, but it would be very interesting to go forward on that. We had, for example, here confronting nudges, because there was mentioned earlier, so what happens if we really, are people tending to also go more in another direction? Are they really, if it hits them in the face, more likely to change their behavior, whilst others will be reluctant and say, okay, I don't change my behavior at all. Others need more reinforcement in that extent and would be more willing to change their or adapt their behavior if they are reinforced rather than confronted. So we saw particular, and I mentioned that a couple of times already, we saw particularly this perceived behavior control, and one thing that is really crucial here is to have the real-time information about energy consumption, or at least very close information. So for example, in Germany, we're very much behind with the smart meter rollout, and people get their energy bill once a year. So they change their behavior. They know, like through the energy crisis, we decrease our heating, etc. They have no feedback if this helped. They have no feedback what extent that would mean for their energy bill. And particularly speaking, or that we identified here that perceived behavior control is so crucial we expect that this information needs to be much more in real time, needs to be, I mean, we are now used on the phone to see like everything in real time, right? And that the energy bill comes once a year is just not, it's not timely anymore, let's say. We also saw some reoccurring patterns, and that I want to point out here. So one, for example, being that the nudges were more effective when new behaviors are performed or learned as compared to when practices were just adapted. So the example here is that in the German case, people learned how to charge their vehicle, how to adapt for the PV usage, and it's easier to go into a new pattern once I'm doing something completely new than exchanging patterns. So really to also see where is the point in time to address the people when they're changing their behavior, when new things are acquired, and then go in there, and it's much easier than trying to get it in an existing approach. I'm speeding up. Last thing, because this was also quite interesting, is on the literacy and how can we empower consumers. We had it earlier on financial literacy already. Here also the question on energy literacy, how well do people understand what they are doing, and also that goes back to the information and awareness raising on the consumers. And we saw, particularly in the Belgian pilot, what role it plays for younger generations to be part of this transition. How can we empower those to really understand what is happening? And we see a huge, also I saw it in the other project, Evident, I was talking to earlier, like also this, we see that the younger generation is more energy literate but less financial literate, and I think that matches quite brings a lot of implications where we can also, the younger generation is a bit more open also to eager to learn, but it's difficult to directly get that from the pilots, to be fair to say. Okay, last point here, it was also mentioned earlier, we cannot go with the nudges against regulatory frameworks. So it really has to go hand in hand, and from our perspective, ideal would be that these nudges are formed, like that these nudges support policies, regulatory frameworks. We cannot expect them to outbalance regulatory frameworks like the one in Croatia that was just not favorable at all, and would skip that. And I think from the summary I've said everything anyways, so that's it from my side.
Thank you, Heike. Thank you very much, Heike, for this, again, very comprehensive presentation. Does it work? Does it work? Because I can't hear myself.
Breathing too much.
Is it me? Because
No,
I didn't
I'm
turn it
breathing
off.
too much, I think.
You drink too much.
I'm breathing too
You're
much.
breathing too much. Okay, yeah, because I'm not drinking.
Yes, please.
Should I use this one? Can you hear me now? Yes, you can. Okay, super. Sorry. Okay, I will do a switch. So now I know it works. So do we have questions for Heike? Please. You have to press on the button. Not the button. Red?
It's coming. Try again.
Is it? Yes,
Yeah.
it is now. Okay, thank you. Very interesting presentation. I also liked the previous part on the nudge, and I had a question then, but I reserved it. Do we know how long nudges last? As in the impact of the nudges, how, in time, how often do we have to reiterate? Some people have mentioned if you repeat too often, then it has the adverse effect, perhaps. And I'm saying this specifically also to the energy efficiency first principle. We also know about the rebound effect. So people may invest in something that will improve energy efficiency, but then they say, oh, for the same cost, I can leave more, increase the temperature on the thermostat and things like that. So maybe we need nudges also to maintain energy efficient behavior and avoid this rebound. Are there any results on that?
Mm-hmm. So I would give my take, and then the colleagues who did the more statistical part can jump in, and who work directly with the pilots. I mean, a super interesting question, super important question. How long do these effects last? What was challenging also in the field experiment and really to work, to single out these effects is the time periods that we could work with. So, for example, the question: how much time do we have to measure ahead of the intervention, and how much time can we attribute after the intervention to really see the effect? To my knowledge, the effects were rather short term, but I would add to that in one moment. But maybe you want to go first, Anne, and then.
Yeah, so the answer is a little bit a two-part thing. So in the app data, we actually see that the clicks are highest early on, like when people first learn about the nudge. But we did an event study design also to see how the time path goes, and we really don't find a lot there. And so our explanation for this is basically that the usage behavior is so individual that it spreads out throughout the period. But we tried, and we don't see like a clear fatigue effect, but we do see app usage spiking early on.
Yeah, and maybe, but I'm not sure, or I don't think we can say this from the data, but what I really found interesting when we looked at the different pilots is this forming new behavior because something is happening. Yeah, so forming, we saw this huge spike, like 15% reduction of energy demand in the households that use the EV charging and the prosumaging aspect. So it's something different, like, okay, you decide, like, from now on, every day I go running, and then maybe after 3 weeks. But if you form, like, if you have a completely new setup, because you have these new technologies, you see that this is an approach that saves you a lot. The hope would be, and we see this, for example, not from this project, but in general, people are most likely to really change their mobility behavior in the long term when they have a certain point in time, like getting children moving out, like really these very specific points in time, and that could then create long-lasting behavior change, which is a different thing than maybe today you shower shorter. Like, yeah, it takes time until these behaviors actually stick with us, let's say. But we can't see that from the design as such. You had another question? I'm not sure. Did this answer the questions, or there's another open question? I forgot.
No, I think that answered the question. No one answered really the rebound effect, but I think it's the same question.
Yeah, and that even, I'm not sure we asked that in the survey, but we have already, like with the data sets that we have here, I think it's very unique as to the kind of data sets that we compare. We have the survey, we have sensor data, we have the app data, and we have the data from the smart meters, but we have not in detail measured, for example, or asked for, okay, how did your expenditure change now? Yeah, so I think it's similar answer, but we have also not followed up on that in detail, but correct me if we have. I haven't seen anything on that, but yeah, super relevant, of course.
Yeah, so we did not test specifically for rebound effects in the pilots that have prosumers, so the German and the Croatian. We see some effects that when self-consumption rises, total consumption also rises. We don't see it in household consumption, so a bit the working hypothesis here is that it has to do with how people charge their vehicles, but we did not test specifically for it.
Okay, thanks a lot, Heike. I know that, sorry, you had a very quick question.
A quick one. Is there a limit on the target groups nudging can be used for? Sorry? The target groups, can it be used for everybody, or are there limits? For who doesn't it work?
Yeah, I mean, we see that we have target groups that are much more difficult to reach, but it really also depends on the kind of nudge. So, for example, if we have financial incentives, we saw earlier, like financial incentives, people that have a higher income cannot really reach by the financial incentive. Yeah, so the baseline or the thing is that we would say, okay, you have people also in terms of where we cluster them to which group they belong that are more that you have to nudge them through different aspects, right? Some you would reach better by appealing to the social norm or the overarching goal that you are reaching. Some you could nudge by financial aspects, and some would be reluctant to any. So definitely you will not be able to reach all consumers through these nudges. So it can always only be an addition to the regulatory framework, etc.
Thank you very much, Heike. Sorry, I have to play the role of the bad lady here, but we are time bound and we are already behind schedule. Of course, we are also having a cocktail after our conference, so from 5:15, I would say, onwards, you can always approach our speakers and ask further questions in case you have any. Now I would invite Max to the podium, Maximilian Kocianski from RIC. He is senior researcher at Research and Innovation Center Pro Academia in Poland. Since 2012, his field of research is energy efficiency and sustainable energy policy. He is a member of the governmental steering committee of the Polish strategic R&D program, New Energy Technologies, and also contributes to the EU-level R&D evaluations of RE-energising Europe. He graduated from Warsaw School of Economics and also a PhD in environmental engineer. So as for the last two speakers, we already heard about new trends in the modeling part this morning, and he will present us some of the policy recommendations. Max, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Julia. Thank you very much for the three excellent presentations before mine. I'm very happy that I'm the last, because in new trends in the energy demand modeling that we did, you could see how important are the policies that are not only designed but implemented in a smart way. What happens if a policy is not implemented in a smart way? You will see that. You will see how important are multiple impacts and how striking sometimes those impacts might be when you try to do something that affects energy consumption. So you will see those different impacts in my presentation, and of course behavioral aspects and what are the impacts of regulatory framework on energy behaviors of consumers. So all the three ties will come together in this last presentation, and I'm very happy to show you the policy learnings from new trends. So first I'll shortly explain what are the opportunities and challenges for policymaking triggered by new societal trends. And by new societal trends in our project we meant, here is a very brief recap from the morning, so prosumaging, so transition from consumers to prosumagers, so prosumers plus storage management. Second, digitalization of economy and private life. Third, towards a shared economy. And fourth, towards a circular economy and low carbon industry. In the EU policy, those trends have been with us for a few years or 50 years. Like, and digitalization was first mentioned in the EU law in the 1970s. So it's quite a very strong trend. But like a shared economy, it's something that is quite new to the EU policymakers. It will come, and you will see how in my presentation. So opportunities and challenges for policymaking triggered by new societal trends. We see that these trends might have disruptive potentials. So we might see something coming that will simply blow our minds. The nice linear graphs we are plotting might be not relevant anymore. And what does it mean for policymaking? You will see that in my presentation. Controversial impacts. There is yin and yang. You can see in that icon. We have seen that in each trend there is often a dark side. We are happy about being a prosumer with digitalization. We are so optimistic and positive about that. I will show you that it is important to remember about this dark side and consider that in policymaking. Last but not least is interrelationships. So it is getting more and more complex. So we have been already seeing digitalization, with shared economy, with platforms for commuting, with platforms of totally new forms of consumption. It is getting more and more complex and requires different action from policymakers. What I mean in practice, case by case. So for prosumption, here you can see some examples of disruptive potential we see for prosumers in Europe. Our colleagues here from TU Vienna worked on the potentials of electricity demand shifting that can come from more electrified heating systems in Europe. These potentials are very important for decarbonizing the European energy system. With this more electrified systems, we can have simply less carbon in our energy consumption. What does it mean for policy making? We need enhanced and new policy instruments that will allow us to reap those benefits of more electrified heating systems that are less carbon intensive. First, we need local and dynamic electricity tariffs combined with a faster rollout of smart meters. We don't see that as fast as we would like to see from this research perspective. As you can see from those potentials to become real, implemented, we would like to see those local electricity tariffs, smart meters coming more and wider and faster. Second, we of course need policy instruments to protect vulnerable consumers. Over the last winter, we have seen the terrible price caps, terrible from the perspective, of course, of the energy efficiency and stimulating that, but we need to find alternatives to protect those vulnerable consumers, considering, of course, the local pricing and dynamic pricing that we are recommending from the first point. Last but definitely not least, we need standardization to enforce heat pumps, controllability through external signals. So this is another policy learning from this case study. From prosumaging, we have also investigated controversial impacts. So here you can see a study by Research and Innovation Center for Academia on 1,000 prosumers in Poland. It turned out that prosumers in winter increase their electricity absorption from the grid. It's something that is happening, that is very unsustainable for the energy system, but we need to consider that such things happen if you push for prosumaging in a way that is not designed from the energy efficiency first principle. Then you might see such controversial impacts, negative impacts on energy systems. In the 1990s, the electoral campaign in the US was won by the slogan, "It's the economy, stupid." We have the learning for the European policymaking here. It's energy efficiency first, stupid. So we really need to remember that energy efficiency first needs to be enforced in policymaking, in policy implementation at all levels and at all areas. For circular economy, we are seeing mostly over the last years of European policymaking this top part of the graph. So from waste management to material production to building design. So thinking about recycling and that part of circular economy. And we see that in our modeling by Fraunhofer ASI on circular buildings, that these potentials from the other parts of circular economy, so on the use phase, on the building design in circular economy, are something that is mind-blowing. So this disruptive potential that we see in circular economy needs to be grasped with, again, enhanced and new policy instruments to address all stages of a building's life cycle with well-balanced, without contradictions. Second, we need to broaden the scope of understanding. The circular economy is far more than just cycling the materials, so the upper part of the graph, so the use phase, so repurposing the buildings, protecting cultural heritage of buildings, reducing floor space demand, reducing the over-specification of elements by volume. So it's much complicated and needs to be implemented in practice. We see here the role of the public sector. As this is difficult, then we believe that this exemplary role of the public sector through, for instance, green public procurement could be an excellent vehicle to support that process. Controversial impacts here again, and interrelationships of the digitalization, the third trend. Our partners from WISE have worked on a study on locations of data centers, and their climate neutrality is strongly linked to the actually energy supply aspect. So access to direct air, free cooling, water resources availability, possibility of excess heat exploitation. So what we see here for the policy making as a policy learning is, first of all, we need more coordination between policies, as for instance, the climate neutrality of data centers now is not super well integrated, for instance, in the EU taxonomy for sustainable activities. That is now quite restricted to the exploitation phase. But from the case from WISE, these recommendations come that we need to consider this a little bit earlier and think about planning the centers well ahead. Similar for the EU funding for the European Regional Development Fund and other facilities. For disruptive potentials for digitalization, here again we have interrelationships and for instance, the e-commerce, telework, smart buildings, these aspects of digitalization have both good and bad impacts on energy demand. We see, for instance, on smart buildings that this is a very promising aspect of digitalization that can drive down the energy demand. So consider focusing on subsectors with high potentials. It's exactly that what we need, what we recommend for policymakers. Yeah, and for the shared economy, here we looked into the potentials of car sharing, shared mobility, in particular car sharing, carpooling, car service, and our colleagues at E3M worked on the increasing of occupancy rates of cars in Europe. And you can see here on the graph this amazing potentials of increasing the occupancy rate, so increasing the efficiency of the resources we have at hand and limiting the emission rates in the transport system. What we need here is actually similar what we need in overall transport sector, so effective carbon tax implementation, more stringent CO2 standards for cars and vans. This is something that is needed anyway for the whether you use your private car or a shared vehicle. Increase availability of alternative fuel infrastructure. Without that, this will not be feasible. So to conclude, disruptive potentials from new societal trends necessitate enhanced and new policy instruments to reap the benefits that are coming from those new societal trends for the EU decarbonization. For controversial impacts, we need policies facilitating the acceleration new societal trends to consider the built-in mechanisms to prevent potential negative effects that you might have noticed from the from prosumerging case, from the data centers growing electricity consumption. And interrelationships, finally, we need stronger policy coordination between policy areas, first, but also at policy levels between the EU member states and the implementation at EU level and policy member states implementation. Thank you so much. I hope I didn't get...
Thank you very much, Maximilian. Since I'm a bad person, I will only allow one question because we are only 15 minutes late. Here, wait.
A very simple one, and it also applies to the Nudge project. I just want to know what is going to be the future path of, because I guess the project is also ending. So what are the next steps?
The next steps. Well, first of all, we don't have this great opportunity as MICAT. That's fantastic to see that clear path. However, I think I can mention that we have established such a close, very well efficient working collaboration within the consortium that I am quite confident that we'll continue working together on those topics, as new societal trends are amazing, and these things are happening so fast. For instance, the study on prosumers that we did in New Trends was not planned initially when we submitted the proposal, so there was no data available. So this new opportunities are triggered every day, so we are quite confident that we'll use those. At least.
Okay, thank you very much, Max. And now I will invite to the stage Emma Mooney. She is an energy analyst and behavioral change lead in the Office of Energy Efficiency and Inclusive Transition of the International Energy Agency, and has more than 20 years of experience in the energy sector as a chartered engineer with an MSc, MBA, and PhD in industrial energy efficiency. So you will now introduce the final part of the day, giving us an overview of the necessary evolution of energy efficiency policies for inclusive transition. Emma, please, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here and lovely to be back on European projects. I spent some of my time working for the Tipperary Energy Agency, and we're involved in European projects, and it's really nice to be back in this type of environment. I'll try to be quick because I know everyone's tired and you've been sitting down for a long time. So what I'm going to talk about is the necessary evolution of energy efficiency policies for the inclusive transitions. And this kind of comes on the back of, we had our recent working party. It's a twice yearly meeting that we have of our governments. And this was one of the topics that came up, how energy efficiency policies are going to have to evolve and how that's important for the inclusive transition. And a lot of that came down to behavioural change and how we can include behavioural insights into our policies. Just to set the scene, and actually our main report came out today, so these charts are now probably out of date. But the path to achieving 1.5 has narrowed, and not in a good way. At the moment, if we go with our steps, which are our stated policies, by 2100, we're going to be at 2.9 degrees. And we really need to increase our level of energy efficiency and increase our decarbonisation. It'll be 1.5 degrees by 2010, if we're going to get there by... To get to 1.5 by 2100, we have to increase our energy policies. We know we have the tools and the technologies to do this, especially if we increase really rapidly now. But we need to do it. So the ways that we are planning to do it, this is the problem. The solution, we have kind of three solutions that are being proposed. There's the cutting down of methane, there's the increasing of renewable energies, and there's the increasing of energy efficiency. What we see here is the change of electricity. So this is the electricity generation, and you can see around just coming up to 2030, the blue line and the orange line increase rapidly, and that's wind and solar. And what I'm trying to show with this graph is that we're going to be changing to electricity, we're going to be changing to electrical systems, but we're going to be changing to a renewable source of electrical systems. So we're going to need to change to adapt to that. So how are we going to change? What is the other solution? The other solution then is we're going to triple our renewable energy, and we're going to double our energy efficiency. This is the solution that we're proposing, which is great. So by 2030, we need to double our energy intensity to 4.2%. That's after an average of about 1% up to 2020. In 2021, or just under 2, sorry, in 2021 it was 1%, and then in 2022 it jumped up to 2%, and we need to get that up to 4.2%. So they're the solutions. But the problem is there are problems with the solutions. One of the problems with the solutions is we're going to try and reach to reach net zero at a time that our population is increasing dramatically. At the moment, we're at 8.1 billion. By 2030, we're to get to 8.5 billion people. And by 2050, it's looking like it might be 10 billion people. So we need to increase our energy efficiency, increase our renewable energy, and at the same time have inclusive transitions where everybody gets to benefit from this. So the solutions with this, the inclusive solution is where governments and policymakers include things like decent jobs, skills and training, social dialogue, gender inequality in our energy efficiency policies. What we want is for there to be net zero with population growth, but to leave no one behind. And this has been mentioned a few times today, that we need to do it where everybody gets included. The people-centred inclusive means equal and access to the multiple benefits as well. It's not that there are multiple benefits, but that there's equal access to multiple benefits. And especially if we think about the earth warming and the amount of air conditioners and cooling that we're going to need just for people to have a basic standard of living. So we want to have a transition with people at its centre. So how do we do that? Well, some of the things that we talked about were how do we evolve our energy efficiency policies? And there are kind of two ways that we look at that we can evolve them. The first one is around the flexibility. So it's about the fact that we have all this renewable energy coming online, and we have all these people who are turning more and more to electricity and going away from other fuels. On the flexibility side, we need a lot more demand response. We need people to be flexible in their energy use, but a lot of this is based on the data. So it's about collecting data, having good quality data, using that then to control our systems and to help people control their systems. It's about having intelligent systems, and it's really about as well, there's the important things like the frameworks that enable asset management. So that means that we can control the assets, we can control the systems, and also about data standardization, which is a really important and key element for us. On the other side then, there's the action-based elements. And if we look, there was a report, our initial net zero report in 2022, I think it was, did an analysis of behavioural change and the impact of behavioural change to 2050. There was about 40% of the CO2 emissions were due to a technology change. So that's putting up a big wind turbine or solar PV. About 8% of the changes were down to behavioural change. So that's you choosing not to fly, people turning down their thermostats. And the remaining about 55% was a combination of the two. It's where you have a technology, but then you have the people making decisions that impact how that technology is used. And this is where we need to build behavioural analysis and behavioural insights into our policies. We need to have things within our policies that are built in that do things like capacity building measures. We need people to be trained. There's no point saying that we're going to have all of these heat pumps and there's no one who can install them. We need the policies there at the same time that we're putting the heat pumps in, that we're doing the electrification. We need to have the people there to put them in. We also need to have then operation and maintenance built into our policies. This isn't just about putting in a technology and leaving it there. If you don't, I'll go back to heat pumps, if you don't maintain your heat pumps every year, you can get a drop of 10 to 30% after 5 years in your efficiency. What's that going to do for our system when we have lost that level of efficiency already? We need very consumer-friendly energy-related information. We've done some work in the IEA on this where we like our graphs and our charts and our data. And when we work with our comms department, they keep on telling us, you're not talking to people like you. You're not talking to yourself. You're talking to someone who has no interest in energy. You're saying about people turning up and down thermostats. Most people don't want to turn up and down thermostats. They want a button, they press, and they leave it, and they go away. Now, they can have the option of doing it, but most people don't really want to care about this. And if you looked at the chart earlier and how much we're going to be turning towards electrification, most people are going to be really sick of this after a while. Like, this is going to be a huge thing, and it's going to be a daily part of our lives, but just telling people turn off a light switch and having a cutesy little character telling you to do it isn't going to work. So we need to work with our consumers and what information do they need at the right time that we can give them that's easy to understand. We need to include choice architecture in our policies. This is about making the easy choice for people to take the energy efficiency choice. There are lots of examples of this in the Netherlands, changed their infrastructure so people could cycle and things. I'll take a really easy example from our building, the IEA. You go in the door and you have to go down. Just beside us, there are 3 lifts that you can take. To get to the stairs, you have to go through 4 doors into a service elevator. It's like a service place with the lights never turn on, and go up the stairs. So the energy efficiency choice is not built into that building. You're taken towards lift. And it's that sort of thing. It's making the energy efficient choice not even a choice, getting rid of those friction, making it a frictionless process. People just do it as part of what they're doing anyway. A really key one is that we have behavioural insights. People with behavioural insights are involved at the policy making level. There are a number of countries who have behavioural insights teams working with their policymakers. They go around and tell their policymakers, we do behavioural insights, you have to come to us. That's really important and can have a huge impact on the policy. And one of the interesting things I thought about this was, I was talking to someone about this recently, and they said, you know what happens normally? People say, I would have thought of that anyway. And I thought that's a huge compliment, because you've got it to the point where you can make things as easy for the policymaker to put the policy in place. It makes so much sense that they would think that they could do it anyway, but they wouldn't have. You've just done but that's a perfect example of using your behavioural insights to get the behavioural insight into the job. And there was, I think earlier you said in the Nudge project how policies impact on behavioural change. And this is about how behavioural insights can impact on policy so we don't have to do those end-of-line changes. And the final thing then is the sharing of best practices and approaches. And this one is a kind of a call out that we have to ye from the agency. When we talk to our policymakers, they don't have time to read through case studies. They don't have time to test out programs. They want to know what they can do now very, very simply and what the key things they can do. So if you have a good case study, if you have a good example, put it in simple, easy terms and get it to someone who can get it to the policymakers. The other thing I would say is that this, of course, this is focused on Europe, but this is a much bigger problem. We have, as I say, there's going to be 10 billion people, and most of those people actually need energy. Energy is a good thing. Like, we're always talking about reduce energy, but energy empowers people to be healthy and happy and to live their lives fully with healthcare, with all sorts of things. And we need to get that to the people in sub-Saharan Africa, the population increase in India. We need those things. But for them to benefit, the multiple benefits that we get from energy and from energy efficiency, then we need to make sure that we use our energy properly and that we share our experiences with them as well. Talking about sharing experiences, so at the IEA we're doing some work on this. These are some of the projects that we have and things, and one of them here is the Campaign Exchange, which is a project we're working on with 8 governments on behavioural change and behavioural change campaigns at the moment. And it's fascinating talking to people about what they find works for them and how they can influence policymakers as well. And again, as I say, sharing information is really, really important here, but sharing it in the right way with a clear and simple message. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma. Any immediate reaction to Emma's presentation? Please.
Yeah, my question is related to, let's say, practical cases or example of what you also mentioned, because I think we don't only need to look to sub-Saharan Africa. If we just look, for example, I'm from Germany. If I'm a rich person and I want to have green energy, I can actually get more money because I can invest in a photovoltaic plant, and then I have cheaper energy. If I'm a poor person and I actually fall into that because I don't have a roof where I can install my own, so I have to buy a green energy contract and I pay more for my energy. So I mean, this is also kind of one issue, and yeah, I would like to know if you have more of these examples and where we could share these, especially across countries, because I guess maybe someone from another country has a solution to this, but someone from another country doesn't even know about it.
Yes, that's a huge problem, and you might have, I don't know if you follow the IEA, but our office name has changed from Energy Efficiency to the Office of Energy Efficiency and Inclusive Transitions. And one of the key things we want to do is not to make it equal access to everyone, it's to give access to people who need it most and to concentrate on the most vulnerable, the people who really need it. That's why I was using sub-Saharan Africa, but of course there are people everywhere, and usually when we look at we have charts that look at where the benefit goes. And there's a graph that very clearly shows that when you do subsidies, it is the richest people that get the most benefit from the subsidies and the poorest people get the less benefit. There are policies that are changing like that. I think in France recently they've changed their renovation program so that the poorer you are, or depending on your income level, you get more benefits. So there are places that are changing like that. But we're always looking for case studies as well. But one of our key drivers is to make sure that policies are fair and inclusive and bring everyone with them as opposed to leaving people behind. And as for where you can share information, you can definitely share it with us. We're always happy to get it. But there are multiple forums. I'm presuming even this is an opportunity to share. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Margot.
If I may have immediate reaction to both of you and in general, maybe one field of research that we could launch is about ownership of demand-side assets, because that would solve the problem of equal access to energy transition of energy poor. And I think we have already market-based successful examples, notably in Brussels, where the demand-side assets do not need to be owned by only used. And I think it's a great opportunity because this would solve the problem that you mentioned with maintenance and operation, where these assets are not necessarily, especially the shiftable loads, things like heat pumps, things like hot water boilers preparation. These are installations. Nobody really personalizes very much. They need to provide a certain level of comfort, certain service, but we do not care what kind of heat pump do we have in our basement or whatever. So maybe some more study about ownership and future, maybe this could be part of the electricity system infrastructure. Maybe it should not stop on the meter, but go beyond,
Okay. Just continue this discussion. Sorry, Helene,
I can
please.
also just
Yes.
react in the panel if you want.
No, you can do it now.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention the concept of energy communities, and I will obviously talk more about that in the panel. But we are, I think, very much underestimating the potential that is still lying within this new concept of this socially innovative way of governing the energy system and governing energy services on a collective basis. So I just wanted to mention that as a sort of solution to not having your own roof or not having access to a lot of money, but still being able to participate in in the energy transition as a whole. So, and also benefiting from it. But I'm happy to talk about that more in the panel.
Thank you. Thank you, And with that, I think I would invite you on stage, because now we have the last part of our afternoon, which is actually a panel discussion. So Emma, I invite you to please take a seat. And with Emma, we have Hélène Skockhart, who is a project manager for Community Energy for Energy Solidarity Project at rescoop.eu. Then I would also invite Indra Van Sande, who is Policy Officer for Energy in the Climate Team of the City of Ghent. Together with the three ladies, I also invite the fourth lady, so Nieves de la Valle, whom we heard from before in the morning. For those of you who just arrived, she's a behavioral economist in the European Commission at the JRC, in the Unit of Energy Efficiency and Renewables. And then finally, I would also invite our only gentleman. So Alessandro, yeah, here he is. Alessandro Mostaccio, who's president of Movimento Consumatori, so consumer organization, and member of the European Economic and Social Committee, and board member of the European Consumer Union. And unfortunately, we had a sixth speaker, Roland Gladushenko from EURIMA, but as I said before, is unfortunately sick and so couldn't make it today. So we heard about the policy framework at European level from Margot. We heard some recommendations from the three projects, and then Emma gave us a global overview and some of the ingredients that we will need to take into consideration for future energy scenarios and policies. I'm very unlucky with microphones today. Okay. I have some questions for you. I would like to ask all of you, each of you, one or two questions, and then open the discussion with the public. And then, as said, we will have also a cocktail reception. So I would like to start with you, Emma. We heard so far in the whole day that the situation is quite complex. We have a complex policy mix, we have different instruments, we have factors that are changing disruptively scenarios. You also mentioned now demographic growth, which is something else that we need to take into consideration. But I would like to ask you something about a concept that is very dear to me, to make it even more complex, which is the concept of multi-level governance. So on top of having a very complex scenario out there, there is also a very complex team or a lot of actors that have to act on this. So what is the role of the different actors in this highly complex scenario? How can results from these projects and also the research that we've been hearing from support in this?
Thanks for the question. I'm probably going to be going back over some of the stuff that I said earlier, but I think when you look at the multi-level governance, the role of all of the different levels of society are very important when we look at the policy side of things, are very important that they're reflected in policy, because if we don't reflect the different, the multi-level governance in society, in our policies, then we're not going to get buy-in. And we really need buy-in in our policies. The citizens have always been important, and the role of the citizen has always been important, but it's ever increasingly not as just the recipient of energy and the user of energy, but they're engaging and they're actors within the energy system. So engaging with those at all levels and at the multi-level of governance is really important. And I think when I was talking about that statistic that the 55% are people making decisions, that's not just people buying an electric car, that's also people within the levels of governance, within companies, making decisions about energy and energy policy. And it's really important that they have enough information and power to make those decisions. One of the things I think that is important, though, is not just that the multi-level governance is reflected in policies, but that the voice is heard and that is taken into account. And that, again, we need clear communication on what is needed within policies. We need to know the impact on policies, and we need to know, we need to make sure that what we're recommending from the advice that we're given, for example, from citizen deliberation or anything like that, is that it's scalable and measurable, and that's really important, I think.
Thank you, Emma. Now I will turn to Indra. So Indra, you're here representing the city of Ghent in Belgium, so a local or public authority. We heard before that especially in our work we did in the MICAT project, there was a big problem in terms of data availability, especially on the local level. So since you are the actor who is closest to citizens and of course can best support citizens on the ground, I would like to ask you if this lack of data poses a problem to you, and what solutions can be implemented for that?
That's correct. There is a huge lack of data. I think privacy policy in Ghent also plays a role, in Belgium also plays a role in it, but we don't have any, not a good view on the state of the buildings. We did do survey and so on for 1,200 dwellings and so on to get an impression, but it's the fact that we don't have very well data on local level. What we're trying to do is build data by projects. For instance, we have a one-stop shop, and we advise quite a lot of inhabitants yearly, and we try to convince them to keep track of their energy use by using Energy Idea, and also when they implement measures that we can also track their energy use. But it's collecting slowly data, but we don't have general data really correctly, but it offers us a sort of examples to use for other citizens to convince them to go along on retrofitting. We also have, we do surveys of cases. For instance, I heard it quite a lot today, this afternoon, energy efficiency first, but we have in Ghent, if you look at the average income in Ghent, it's lower than the average income in Flanders. So we don't have such a wealthy population. And if you say energy efficiency first, that means an investment curve like that. For everybody who wants to retrofit, and we see that not everybody can do that. So we're looking for a tipping point where you, at some point, temporarily stop with insulation, then you go to renewables, heat pump proof, and then you can retrofit and insulate further on. It's because else we just won't reach 2050. So we also do analyze business cases. Where is that tipping point that the energy efficiency is acceptable, that the building is heat pump proof, that we can phase out fossil fuels, and then we go on further with energy efficiency. I know it's not how it's been told here, but if you have many inhabitants with incomes like in Ghent, you have to do something to decarbonize much quicker and to make also the cost acceptable for them. And there we do surveys, and then you see also the co-benefits. We had, for instance, just a small case, we had a terraced house, and we asked how many steps does this house still have to do to become fossil-free? And it was only 2 steps, insulating the rear facade that she still had to do, the owner, and a heat pump, a high-temperature heat pump. And it was an investment of 35 euros, and her energy bill would stay the same. So we thought, this is bad news. But we brought the news, and then she said, oh, I'm relieved. So we said, why? She was relieved because it were only 2 measures. She was afraid that we would ask her to also insulate the front facade, the floor, extra insulation, the roof, and so on. She said, now I can easily, I can manage this. between now and 2050. I can also, I'm convinced that the energy price will go up and I will have a return on investment later on, and I will be able to insulate further on. So, and also the comfort played a role. So we were very happy that there are co-benefits and that also we can use them to convince people to go towards fossil-free. So I know it's not completely the energy efficiency first principle, but you have to manage on the field with the people you have in front of you and with the questions that sometimes they say, it's just, I can't pay it. And we do have cheap energy loans, but there still is a limit on that too.
Thank you, Indra. What you said is very, very interesting, and also brings me to the next question that I would like to pose to Nives, because the perception is, it seems to me that the final burden at the end almost often goes to the consumers, to the final consumer. So is that what you also perceive, Nives? Also, Margot said before that if there are inefficiencies in the system, somebody needs to pay for them in the end, and who pays for them most often is society or consumers. So it's essential to target not only consumers, but also other actors. What do you think about this? Why is it important?
Thanks, Julia. Yes, indeed. We cannot only target citizens, not consumers, because we are in the energy citizenship framework. So definitely all actors involved in the energy transition have to be targeted. And just to recall again the energy citizenship framework, if we want to find some reasons why we need to do that, is because we want really to also promote a transition that is just, and if we aim to really promote the role of not only optimal consumers in this transition, but also a full energy citizen, then we really need to make citizens part of the energy decision-making process, so not only passive receiver of interventions that we as technicians or researchers think that are best for them, but we really need to make them included in the energy decision-making process. And that means that citizens also have to be empowered to make all the stakeholders included in the energy decision-making process accountable of their decisions. So in this, let's say, further transition that we might also think about in addition to the energy transition, we need to think of policymakers, researchers to rethink critically also of the let's say, epistemological norms, which are different from, let's say, social norms that we have heard a lot about. So let's say, the views through which we see the world, solutions and problems. I always work with engineers in our unit, and I see also today we heard a lot that energy efficiency is needed, but of course we also heard today that for many people, citizens, this is not a top priority. So we really need to find a language that speaks, that can be spoken by everyone. And so if we want to target actors other than citizens, then also policymakers, local actors, stakeholders, researchers need to be targeted. And here I see a lot of potential also from behavioral sciences, as these insights can also help all of us understanding that we can develop together a common language, and we are all human beings that are all vulnerable to cognitive biases. So one first measure that we can immediately implement, not only targeting citizens, but all actors involved, should be really to become aware that we are vulnerable to those cognitive biases. As just to mention one is the fact that we think that the information of our peers, the peers of our reference group, is the most relevant in the world, but might not be the case. Otherwise, then we end up also designing solutions that might not be fit. as we heard also the app that somehow is not immediately used, or we then end up having a ventilation technology then is misused properly, and then we say, oh no, but that was a rebound effect. Or maybe it's a pre-bound effect because the energy savings were estimated based on wrong or partial assumptions. So we all need to be critical and proactive in rethinking also a common language. Over for now.
Thank you, Nives. And you spoke about multiple actors, and one of the, let's say, new actors on the scene, or most recent ones, are energy communities. So, Helene, Nives also mentioned vulnerable consumers. I have actually many questions to ask you, but I would like to start with the one on how can energy communities be an actor to also make sure that the transition is more just and inclusive.
So yeah, I represent RES Group EU, the European Citizen Energy Cooperative Federation. We are based in Brussels, a bit further from here, and we at the moment represent about 1,900 citizen energy cooperatives, a couple of which are in the room, and so yeah, it's what role can energy communities play in this regard? So we see that when we look at the way that they came into being and claimed their position in local energy systems, we see that this was often out of a frustration with the current energy system. A lot of decisions were being made above our heads. We were paying a lot of money. We were getting suboptimal services in return, and then crisis after crisis happens, and it looks like this is just accelerating and it's going into nobody knows where. So a couple of people, this is like the classic story, sat down around the kitchen table all across Europe, probably at different times, not all together, but they decided to take control over their own energy production, over their own energy use in a way more interactive way, in a way more proactive way, and they set up these cooperatives or energy communities. It's really like I remember this story from the region of Groningen in the Netherlands, where that was super apparent. Like they had these earthquakes happening. They saw a lot of costs coming into their bank accounts, but they didn't see that much benefits. Like they were so involved in the energy system, but in a negative way. And that's also why there were a lot of energy communities that popped up around the region of Groningen that exactly wanted to make use of the transformative potential of renewable energy and make their own decisions, produce their own energy services in an inclusive and in an empowering, participative way. Of course, now the movement has grown, and we see that we get a lot of reactions that most of the people joining an energy cooperative are the ones that have some time and money to spare to actually invest in or participate in on a voluntary basis in these energy communities. That is the case. I would say at this moment, but that doesn't negate it doesn't negate the potential that is there. It's the only recognized socially innovative way of governing the energy system in Europe at the moment. And there's so much more potential. At the moment, we are expecting a lot of energy communities in a system that is not designed for them. For these smaller players, we see that the Commission is looking at energy communities like, okay, a just energy system participation, but then that is expected in an energy system which is totally rewarding the opposite. So yeah, I think in terms of policy recommendations, maybe I can continue a bit later on, but there's a lot that needs to happen to facilitate these types of social initiatives still, and happy to continue on that further.
Thank you, Helen. I think you answered already also my future questions, but that's great. Alessandra, I wanted to ask you, since you're also part of the Economic and Social Committee, from your perspective, are we doing enough? Is Europe doing enough? We've seen before with Margot the legislative framework. She presented the ED recast. Do you think we're going into the right direction?
Okay, I will try to be honest, and I hope that in 4 minutes, when I close my speech, almost none of you will think that I have gone off topic, okay? But you will be the one to tell me, okay? Well, are we doing enough? We are doing everything we can, given who we are and the limitation we have. But we will make the real step forward if we realize what we are missing in order to be more effective, strong, and credible. I'll try to explain myself. The European Commission has done an excellent job at a technical legislative level. In short, in just a few years, a mammoth, huge transition process has begun. I'm not going to list all the new legislative production that have been dedicated to the green transition, you know, so we spoke before, everybody should know. What have been missing, however, is politics with a capital P, okay? Politics, foreign policy, international cooperation policy, because to carry out this transition, we need many raw materials, the so-called terre rare, no? That are not present in Europe, or at least we have not yet been found. Well, by third countries that possesses these raw materials, the European Union is not perceived as autonomous, authoritative, and credible compared to individual member countries, and in particular those that they know best, having been colonized by them. We forget always a piece of history. In fact, these countries prefer to trade and form strategic alliance with China or Russia, which ironically are perceived as more honest, less imperialist than European countries. I think you can think, look at the story of Tunisia and the 60 millions returned to EU in recent days deals with this very theme. And just as Russia's success and international consensus, despite the invasion of Ukraine, seems to me to confirm what I say. I got to finish. And why don't we have a foreign policy of a level adequate for the purpose? Because we can't. We can't. The European Union is not structured to do it. Is not constitutionally structured to carry out foreign policy. And it will not be able to play a leading role in the world until it begins a definitive process of constitutional structuring. Only in this way will it achieve the political and institutional authority and recognition it needs. Let us complete the construction of Europe. Let us establish a constitutional political entity with its own budget, its own army, its own foreign policy, and not just a single currency, a coin. If we want to truly be protagonists of this challenge, we must put ourselves in a position to compete on equal footing with other major countries. Let's stop thinking we are okay. We are not. We are missing a piece, an important one. Let's get busy. We still have time, but let's hurry. And I stop here, maybe after we can add something else. I was out of topic? Okay.
Thank you, Alessandra. You were not at all out of topic. I think you just broadened our view, which is very focused on energy policy from a technical and researchy perspective. So thanks for that. I would have other questions, but maybe before I do that, is there any question from the public?
Just a very short reaction and quick to Indra, because you were kind of having doubts about if you are applying energy efficiency first principle, and I would like to reassure you, this principle should be applied to the transition as a process, and the end result you should be looking in 2050. So this result you should be kind of assessing in terms of whether you reached the best energy efficiency scenario among the alternatives that you were considering, and not in a given point that you didn't get to, NZEP level at this given moment. So, be reassured, because the end result counts for applying this principle, not the, steps in the process.
System, the energy, electricity distribution system. So that's what you see if you don't implement energy efficiency measures first at the maximum. Then you have the problem of finding enough renewables to supply all the demand. So, and we understand that, but you also have to see it from the perspective from the citizens who have to pay. And it's a challenge. It's a really big challenge to laying down 30 to 60,000 euros for a household. And that's the range what they're facing. So, yeah, but I think with the tipping point, we see that many people are very enthusiastic to try to find it and get more grip on it, and to focus on an acceptable energy bill and not the lowest energy bill. And we see that that is a driver that generates enthusiasm to look from, okay, here we're going to stop, and then we're going to shift to heat pumps, and then you can continue. Yeah. All right.
Thank you. I see Heike has a question.
Yeah, maybe to follow up on that directly, I mean, energy efficiency first doesn't mean energy efficiency above all. And exactly what you say, we saw in a study that we did, particularly on these tipping points, it doesn't mean like that the highest renovated buildings are necessarily the best for the system, because we have also the resources that go into it, right? So also on a systemic level, there is a specific tipping point, how much energy how much can we cover through renewable energies, and how much renovation do we actually need? So the optimum is not necessarily at the point where everything is renovated or insulated to the maximum to be most cost effective on the system level. So I think it's important to say that energy efficiency first doesn't mean energy efficiency above all.
We are in Belgium, so we have 3 policies, the Flemish, the Brussels and the Wallen. And we saw in the Brussels region and the Wallen region that passive building was put into policy, and not in Flanders. So we had we had within Belgium a trend towards maximalization of energy efficiency, and we just can't keep up with that. It's not feasible. Voilà, the context.
Okay, thank you, Emma. We have here another question.
Actually, it's not a question, but rather a remark, comment. What you said, that you are missing the data related to the houses, what are the insulation and so on. I don't know how it's in Belgium, but in Poland there is a regulation, clear regulation, that every house which is new built or want to be rent or sold must possess energy certificates. So if you have the same, so partly you have some data. So maybe it's a question of the legal regulation, European regulation, that, okay, let's have every house, every flat to have such energy certificates. It doesn't cost huge money. I don't know, in Poland, let's say it costs for a small flats roughly 100 euro. Okay, so these are not too big money, but the data are very necessary for everyone and for many purposes. So this is my comment. But the second point is that, okay, we are talking here about the, okay, let's engage society to produce energy. Yeah, if it will be heat or electricity. But the main problem is actually the energy operator. So the energy grid, it's not prepared for that actually. This is the main problem. But this case in Poland, we had a very nice program in encouraging people to install the PV on the roof. But unfortunately, because this kind of installation were too much, the Polish government changed the rules. And actually, after 5 years of, let's say, boom on the PV installation, the system almost collapsed, and is going to down because of changing the rules from the net metering to the net billing, which is for let's say for the people, for society, it's economically unjustified. So I think that we should focus more how to force the energy operator to do something with the grid to be ready. Because the solution that, okay, let's build batteries at our homes, it's much less efficient than building the, let's say, one bigger system or decentralized, let's say, storage energy system. It's much more effective than the one that we have at home, because it's much more expensive, and the people rather not following that way. Of course, there are some subsidy programs, but the question if it's really worth of money to subsidize, let's say, the energy storage system at our homes. I think that it's, in the long term, it's not effective. It's rather a short-term solution, because every country, I think, that do everything to shift the problem far away from the energy operators. We need to do something to force them to improve the energy grid. Because until now, I don't see such movement from the European Commission and from the, let's say, Polish government. They shift the problem and try to pass it to others, to citizens. This is not the way. This is my only comment, opinion, whatever. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I pass the floor to Vlasis, any reaction? I know, Emma, that you wanted to say something, and then if the other speakers also. Sorry? Okay. Any comments to the gentleman?
I just want to say the data, indeed, you can easily have it with a label and so on, and in Belgium it's the same thing. But the outcome of getting the label is issue of privacy policy. So we as a city can't access that data, and the label only accounts maybe for 30% of all our dwellings, so 70% still hasn't got that, or 50%, I don't care, but it's really we don't have it all, and we can't access it. So that's an issue, but okay, I admit it's local, it's our context. And I think your second question is correct, and I can support that demand, because also in Ghent we see that distribution net owners enforce the grid to 400 volts, and we think it will not be enough. And there should be done more, but we as a local authority, we don't have grid, so we look to higher authorities, and we also look to Europe. We're often very Europe very grateful very often, because else in Belgium nothing much would change. I'm really harsh on our Flemish government, I know, and even on our federal government, but we would have, how you call it in English, a rode loper? A red carpet, yes. We would have a huge red carpet if there would be a tax shift. I would be out of job immediately, because electricity is highly taxed, put tax on in Belgium, at least in Flanders, but also to have a date when that gas pipe will be closed. Those two things would help us enormously. And I think the Flemish nor the federal government will ever do something or decide something like that very quick. So I'm really looking forward to have a signal of Europe. Well, this will be the way to go, and then the countries have to follow.
Emma, you wanted to say something?
The question earlier about are we doing enough? I would say no, that you got that question earlier. We're not doing enough. We haven't been doing enough for a long time. There's so much work to be done. Even when you talk about grid security, you talk about security of supply. When you talk about the materials that we need, energy efficiency means we don't need as much as that. We don't need our grid systems to be developed as much. We don't need to import as many materials. We've known these solutions for years and years. When we look at our doubling, the IEA is calling for a doubling of energy efficiency by 2030, and we have everything we need to do that already. We don't need any new technologies. We need to implement what we're doing already. And at the moment, we have a little bit of a headwind because of absolutely horrible circumstances that happened in the war. And so everyone turns to energy efficiency and starts reducing energy, but we don't have to have situations like that for energy efficiency to work. We need to make the case stronger, and we need to make it faster. It needs to work really, really quickly, because these conversations that we're having them internally as well, and people are worried about an awful lot of things, including grid security, including critical minerals. We had a symposium on last year. And energy efficiency is one of the key tools that we can use to do it. It's just not as interesting to people. And we have to make it interesting, and we have to move it forward. And one of the ways is to move behavioural change into that.
Please, Helen.
Yeah, I totally agree that there's a lot that is already out there and that we have to implement, and that we have been super slow with implementing what is already asked from, like, for example, from Europe. There are these super clear definitions, referring back to my own framework about energy communities. There are these targets, these obligations for enabling frameworks, and they are just not transposing correctly. They are not tapping into that potential that is there. At the same time, we see that with the war and with another war going on at the European borders, we see that the trust in governments is declining, that conversations are getting, they're getting trickier, which is, if you want to implement these types of measures, you really need to trust in the people that want to have you implement those measures. And I think that we are there focusing a lot on individual, I'm always talking from my own perspective, but we're focusing a lot on very individualistic measures, like do this, change your behavior, implement energy efficiency measures, renovate your home. But we are forgetting that this is all part of a very individualistic worldview that has left a lot of people just wondering, where am I? Where do I belong? There's so many changes happening around us. If we look at energy poverty and poverty in more general, a super big part leading to poverty and energy poverty is social exclusion. People don't feel connected with each other anymore. We don't have trust in each other anymore. We really need to build our communities up again. We need to remind ourselves what it means to live in a democracy. It's just not something that happens and we go voting once every 4 years. No, it's an active engagement. It's actively participating in society. And we need more trust from the high levels that citizens can do this, that they can participate, and that they are not only recipients, as mentioned before, but that they can actively participate and have a lot of knowledge on where things can go better. Like, for example, if we look at energy poverty measures, a lot of those things are just designed for those people and not with those people, and then don't reach their targets. Like, we have renovation checks in Portugal, and nobody was coming to claim them. So they were left there with all that money, and nobody was claiming them, and they were for the poorest people, and nobody was using. Like, how does that happen? Yeah, because nobody knows about it in the first place, but then also because they were super ill-targeted. So yeah, I think that we need to put more trust in the local level, that we have to activate more citizens. And I think if we look and listen to people that are living in energy poverty, that we will also come to an understanding of where things went wrong, but also how we can make them better in the future.
Thanks, Helene. I think it's the focus on the community part is really important, because especially for renewable energy communities, I think most people put the focus on energy, whereas I think we need to shift to the community ownership, and this is a very nice message to bring in. Before my boss fires me, I need to give him the floor now.
Thanks, all right. Going exactly to what you said, practically Helene replied half of my question that before I asked it. The thing is that we see that from all your members, the majority of your members, and I strongly believe in communities as being part of the solution for the inclusive energy transition. So most of your members deal with RES, renewable energy supply systems. I know it's easy, but still they are quarreling a lot. They are struggling with the national grids to get licenses and so forth. And the question is, we have some few examples that energy communities try to do something on efficiency and renovations. Why has this not happened a lot so far? Well, we know the solution is there. The first one, maybe it's simpler. And second, how do you see it out from your perspective, that what types of policy or environment should be the one that would help the communities deal with efficiency? Already the Article 8 of the EED mentions explicitly that energy communities are part of the solutions and they can generate savings that counts against the targets. So maybe your views on that.
Something that we see that is very interesting, for example, looking at EcoPower, one of the bigger cooperatives or biggest cooperative in Flanders, is that they are creating this whole, we were talking about social expectations or social norms. They're creating these new social norms that, because they are balancing demand with production, they can only have so many members that can also take energy from what they have been producing. So they are encouraging their members to decrease their energy use so that more people can join them and that more people can benefit. And they have seen that this really works. Like, they are creating this this movement of, okay, let's all do this, and more people can join us, and then more people can benefit from this energy that we are producing with our community. So that's one thing. There's other examples of energy communities working on energy efficiency, whether it be through behavioral elements or community norms, like I mentioned. Then there's also ones that are really focusing on renovations, although, as you mentioned, not a lot. But we have recently published these guidelines on district heating and cooling, and we are also at the European level working very hard on the concept of citizen-led renovation, where we are looking at different approaches to really bring a community together around the renovation. A good example is, for example, Les Sept Fonds in France, where they have this network built around one renovation. So you are part of the energy community, and you have the help of one professional, but then a group of volunteers around you from the community that helps with the renovation. And through that, you create skills in the community. And at the same time, you keep the cost of the renovation low, because you only need one professional that helps out with like the technical aspects and teaches you how to do that. And that obviously comes with a lot of challenges in terms of, okay, how do we make sure that they are all that they have all reassurance? Assurance that that there are professionals that want to take on this job. But that's what I mean, that these types of things can be supported by the governments, which is actually the case in the region where Les Sept Fonds is operating. This is a scheme that is acknowledged by the government and is further supported to be developed. So I think this is a really, there's a lot of skills in, we have a lot of DIY people in the room probably. We all have skills, and with some guidance we can lower our renovations a lot. So I think, we need to tap into that as well.
It doesn't go against regulatory barriers, because I know that in some countries there is this problem of that you can't do things yourself and you need technicians, for example, to certify then the final work. Nives, you wanted to add something, correct?
Glenn already covered with the role of trust. Just I wanted to reiterate that. I like how you say that usually interventions are done for people, but not with people, and this is something that often we forget. So, and just to reiterate the role of the local level. So, starting from there, it might seem utopistic, but from there we can start a co-design approach with citizens, experts, and perhaps also tackle that trust issue that now is lacking. And starting from the local level, perhaps we can also increase trust towards the higher level of government. And yes, and energy communities, of course, we are more the expert on that. But yes, I always recall the example of a social energy community in a vulnerable neighborhood in Naples, San Giovanni a Teluccio, which for me is really an example because you can really see how the trust issue can be tackled through the creation of an energy community. So when social capital is totally lacking, but then if you show people that they can actually do something all together for the collective, then they do something together, and then it's a positive spillovers also for other more ambitious goals, just on a parallel side.
Thanks for the positive note. I think we needed it. Wolfgang, did you have something to add?
Very quickly on this debate, while my immediate fear would be a bit that the world is very fragmented, and I'm a bit afraid that these ideas are not easily implemented, I'm very happy to hear that some of these new trends, as we call them, are pushed so strongly. But my question goes in a different way. It's more a practical one. Let's assume that the European Parliament and the European Council, in reward of the very excellent role of the European Commission, has said, we give you a joker article in the Energy Efficiency Directive. So you have one article for free in the Energy Efficiency Directive. And how would you fill this article up? And Helen, to make your job more difficult, energy communities are part of the RED to a large degree. We heard also partly Energy Efficiency Directive. So I take this joke away from you, but maybe you have further ideas. Would be great to hear your ideas on that. I think Emma's presentation contained a number of elements that are interesting, but would hear your voice on that. Thank you very much.
If anyone else wants to react, yeah, it's a good question. If I have an article in the EED that I don't know, I would create, like, maybe just overall, not specifically in the Energy Efficiency Directive, but like overall, I would create a clear taxonomy that really rewards social value over, like not over, but in addition to other values, for example, in public procurement elements or public procurement procedures, that we not only look at efficiency, but that we also look at, okay, but what is the social value that is added here? And I think that is also an important element that we have to look at, like bringing it all together, the systemic view of not only like making sure that our system is super efficient, but that we also, and then I think I would like to coin, I'm super sad that this is nowhere in European communication and not in the Energy Efficiency Directive as well, but energy sufficiency, and that we not use more than we need, but that is like connected with behavioral change as well, but that we are becoming more conscious of what we are actually doing on a systemic level. Because I think that whenever I'm thinking about energy efficiency, I'm thinking, and I gave this example, like, we can have super efficient electric vehicles, but that will not diminish the effect that it has on our streets and the effect that cars in general have on our lifestyle. So I think, yeah, that we need to. I would coin this a new article on energy sufficiency.
Can I just add a little bit to the related to the energy communities? One of the things that we're suffering not only in Spain but in other countries is that the concept of energy communities has become what is it called? There's corporate captivity to that. They're basically corporations have noticed that there are that there's public money going into this, so they nudge people to go the obvious or the easy option, which is sign on the dotted line and join our energy community and we'll do everything for you. So rather becoming part of a real social energy community is harder, because you have to do the co-design, you have to go to meetings, you have to be involved. That's actually harder than just say, okay, I'll buy into the concept that this company is doing. And we even see that the municipalities are buying into it because for them it's easier to say, well, we just give part of our terrain, we give some part of the public building so that this company can fill the rooftops with PV. And that way we are ticking all the boxes for our transition plans and we don't have to do anything else. Whereas the hard way is to mobilize the citizens to facilitate a process where citizens can actually participate. So my question would be, or my proposal would be to actually modify the regulations there, the directives there, so that they don't fall foul of corporate capture.
Time. So, last one.
Well, it's actually a reaction to what was just said. Because in the Netherlands we now have a scheme where, for adding to what Helene told, we have a scheme where the vulnerable people are participating. They pay €1 once and they get a deduction on their energy bill of up to €150 per year. And that is in a very smart way. And we found out this is a sign-in model. And it's especially with the vulnerable households, and I've been working for a few projects, that you cannot actually expect them to take the energy transition in hand. We had one project very shortly in Rotterdam, and I had a presentation there because we were asked by the city to implement solar energy. And after half an hour talking, I said energy for the third time. And somebody in the room said, could you please stop talking about energy? It is so annoying. Have you seen the neighborhood? Have you seen the problems? Have you seen the shit? Have you seen the streets? Have you seen the trees falling over? My mind is not there. And that is where I think you should be very careful to say these kind of cooperative approaches where you can sign in should be ruled out because, well, we can now help these groups of people. And I know they should be both there, and I know the best are coming from bottom up, but it would make it more difficult for the vulnerable, I'm afraid. Okay.
Thank you for the remark. I have to almost close, but on the good side, tomorrow you will have a full day to speak about energy communities and not only, so please come back tomorrow. And also, I'm very happy that our discussion went from quite a bad one to a more positive one with ingredients, desires, and also happy notes, let's say, final notes. So maybe, Alessandro, since you didn't speak so much throughout the debate, I wanted to ask you for one final positive thought. Yes.
No, okay. No, just a flash. A flash means 10 seconds. In 7 months, at the beginning of June, there will be a great opportunity. We will have a great opportunity, the renewal of the European Parliament and a new Commission. So I think that probably we, and all the organized civil society should ask to our national parties and to whoever is running for leadership the European Commission to complete the constitutional framework of EU. We have a great chance, and this could be really a great help for all what we want to achieve. Okay, remember June is an opportunity. June.
Thanks, Alessandro. I have to say that as we share nationality, I'm quite impressed by how optimistic you are about elections, but that's quite refreshing also for me. So, okay, I think with this we can call it a day. I would really like to thank you for staying with us the whole day.